Hey leaders, welcome to this week's episode of Happy Leading Podcast, your weekly feeding for happy leading. I'm your host, Coach Tamika Payne. This week, we are talking about 3 highly effective habits of emotionally intelligent leaders. Emotional intelligence, or EQ, is imperative if you're going to lead in a way that's lasting, that builds legacy, and that gets the real results that you're after. So, I'm going to talk about really smart leaders, and these are the ones who have high emotional intelligence. I want to remind us that leading yourself is the first step in leading well, right? Knowing yourself, leading yourself. I don't think I can say that enough. Leading yourself is the first place of leadership. It's the first place of real leadership. And it's from there that you can lead anybody else, any other scenario, right? So let's go to a definition. So the Institute for Healthy Human Potential, they define emotional intelligence, or EQ, as the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions and the emotions of others. Now that I had not heard before in emotional intelligence. So that was a new layer of this to me. Well, I like it though. They further state that EQ is at the core of the most pressing leadership and organizational challenges, from managing change and fostering a resilient culture to leading in a hybrid world. I mean, that covers everything that we're doing. I think that one of the strengths that I've had and been able to sharpen even more in leadership is this area. So, I one way that you can gauge what you're good at is by what successful other people say you're good at. That's something I was taught growing up from my church. And people often say that I'm aware, like my emotional intelligence is pretty high. Well, I understand the impact that I have and the influence I have, the effect I have on people by what I do. And I'm reading the body language of people as I'm delivering messages, um, and as I'm interacting with them. I'm balancing and weighing the entire time because I want to see if I'm effective at what I'm trying to get across. It's a immediate feedback measure for me. So I do that intentionally, but with that ability comes a responsibility. Also, it's a responsibility not to be manipulative and then not to be manipulated. Also, so it doesn't mean that because I have high emotional intelligence, then I often have my emotions on display, right? Like you'll know what I think. You'll know what's happening in my head. I'm not good at hiding the thing in my head and the thing that comes on my face because they're like the same. And and there's some times where that's good and there's some times where it's not so good. I don't think that leading means you have no emotions. It doesn't mean because I was warned against being emotional. Like you don't want to be an emotional leader. You want to make sure you appear poised and collected and calm and like confident. And I'm like, and emotional, right? Not an emotional wreck, but the fact that I have feelings and that you just you just stroked one, right? Or that I'm passionate about something, or I have reverence for something. You need to know that in our leadership encounters. It doesn't mean that I am weaker or I'm not good at this because you know how I feel about it, or you know what my energy is towards it, my focus is about it. I think that it's a level of understanding that you bring to the situation when you bring your emotions. So I've had many conversations with people that I'm mentoring or coaching, or even in the case with my own kids when it comes to emotional intelligence. I say something not many of them like to hear about emotions. And it's this: emotions are like a buffet, right? There's an array of them that are available to you at your disposal to take as much as you want, to put as much as you want on your plate anytime you want, right? And that means that you choose your emotions, right? So having the emotional intelligence to know that I'm responsible for managing my emotions is also part of this. And so when I'm talking to people about that, they don't really like it because they like to have a reaction, right? Instead of a response. Or like my kids like to say, well, this person made me do this. And I'm like, no, not possible. You're a free moral agent. Nobody made you do it. You chose to go there with them. And we could talk a little bit more about about that emotional intelligence and balancing, your outward expressions more. But I want to talk about this, balancing your emotions, right? So, since we agree that you can choose your emotions, that means that now you're responsible for them. So, and I know a lot of people don't agree with that concept, and it's okay. And I've had conversations with people, and we stop at the place of agreement and we move on. Like we talked about in the previous episode, that when you're dealing with difficult people, you won't always agree on the whole thing, but you can get to the place where you agree the most and let that be there, right? For now. So people are not going to agree with me when I talk about choosing your emotions, but it's what I live. It's what I try to live by, right? So my husband does a good job he has done a good job at training me in this. So I used to get upset with him, right? And then I'm like showing visible, like I'm upset, like arms folded. He'll say something, and I'm like, huh? Like acting like I didn't hear him. Or something. He's like, oh, you didn't hear me? I'm like, maybe, no, right? Just acting like a brat. And he'll say, are you mad at me or something? And I grew to the point early in the relationship to say, yeah, I'm mad at you. I'm mad at how you said this. I don't like this, or, I could say that. And then he said, how long are you going to be mad? When he first asked me that in our marriage, I said, what? I don't know. I'm going to be mad until I'm not mad anymore. He was like, look, you need to be mad for like no more than the next hour because we got to go to whatever thing. We can't go mad. And I'm looking at him like, who are you to tell me how long I can't control how long I'm mad. That's why I can't control how long I'm mad. And he was like, sure you can. Well, I'll be back in an hour. So hopefully you're not mad by then. So I'm like, excuse me, sir. And the reality is that he was right. He was right about it. I believe that now. And so I practice that with my kids. I do the same thing. Like, how long are you going to be mad? And then they have to give me a timeline. Like, we need to put an end to this. Like, can you just be mad for the next, you need 30 more minutes to be mad? Or like, is this like a 2 hour mad thing? Because being mad about it and only being mad about it is not getting us anywhere. Like, you're not getting what you want. I'm not budging. So let's try negotiating, right? Let's jump into this thing. Um, and I think it works like that with all the emotions, right? And I don't want to have that discussion about like grief and some of the harder emotions, but I do think just as a normal practice, um, since if you believe that you're responsible for your emotions, then that gives you the freedom to choose which one you're going to use and to what extent, right? Which one you're going to let play out in your life right at that moment. So, leaders with a low EQ are sometimes aloof, just not sure, they don't know. So, a time where I felt in my emotional intelligence was an assignment where I was still learning the names of the people on my team. So, I went to the facility and I mistakenly called one person by another person's name. And then I like didn't realize it until I had been walking around talking to people doing things for like an hour. And then on my way leaving the facility, I was like, oh, snap, that's not this person, is this person. So I tried to deal in confrontation like professionally and just went up to the person and said, hey, earlier I called you this name, but that's not your name. And I'm sorry. And they said, well, it's okay. And so I said, all right, well, forgive me. I'll work on that. I didn't mean to do that. And I meant it because I'm like, it doesn't matter to me when somebody calls me a different name. I just like, well, I don't know. If you say, hi, Erica, I'm like, hey, I'm not Erica. But like, to me, that hasn't been that important. And we have an inside joke in my household where people call me Tammy because, all right, so real quick story. I worked for somebody really high up in the organization, and I was busting my tail for him. I mean, I was all the things I was supposed to be at all the right moments, and I was hustling. I was job hustling this thing. So we get to we get to a social, and he introduces me to some of his colleagues, and he says, "Yeah, she's great. I'm so glad we got her on the team. Hey, I want you guys to meet Tammy." And then because I want to save face for him, like I'm just like shaking hands because now I'm Tammy and my husband was there, which is like the part that didn't need to happen. So, so he's like, Tammy. And I was like, mm-hmm. And I'm shaking hands because I'm looking at him like, don't say nothing. And it becomes a regular occurrence now that people call me Tammy. I don't know if they think that Tammy is like short for Tamika. It's not, but I also don't mind. I mean, okay. But for some people, that is a problem if you get their name wrong. And that's a little bit different, somebody making up a nickname for you versus somebody just straight calling you the wrong name and they're in your leadership chain. So, so the person told me it was okay, but it wasn't okay because that person later went on to like 4 other people and told them a version of the story that did not happen that way. And it became a thing in the organization. So then I had to address that thing that had become a thing because of the mistake I made. I wasn't aware at the time that it was going to be a big deal for that person, right? The mistaken name that I gave, I didn't realize it was going to be a big deal. And when I went to think back about it, when it came back, circle back around to me, like within that same day, I'm like, oh, that was fast. I replayed the scenario, right? And I think that's helpful. I replayed it with grace, but I replayed the scenario of how that person was acting when I was apologizing. And like, were we making eye contact with each other? Was it me doing most of the talking and they just saying it's okay? Did I take a liberty with like, I'm new, so if I don't have your name right, give me time. And also like put on a name tag so that can help me. I have a name tag, like you should wear one too. Did I do all of those things in that moment? And if I had paid attention, would I have recognized that like, oh man, this is going to be not no bueno. It's going to be not good later on. Because my boss ended up coming back to me with that incident. It got all the way back. The way it came back to me full circle is my boss brought it back up to me. And I was like, I remember that incident. I don't remember it happening like that, but I didn't know. I did not know that it was going to be a thing for that person. And then I started replaying it. I'm like, I should have known though, because when I replayed it, I saw all the cues that this person is not going to let this go. And then so what? Maybe if I had paid attention to their emotional response, I could have addressed it differently. Like maybe I would have written a little note or something, or maybe I would have more publicly apologized or something, maybe I would have done something different, or maybe I wouldn't have. Maybe I would have said what I said, like, hey, I'm sorry and I'm learning names and that's my bad. Or maybe I would have, so I don't know what I would have done, but it would have been great to know that it would have been smarter to pay attention in that moment to the cues, the emotional cues from that person. So then I could be prepared for the aftermath. Right. Another case of this emotional intelligence. I feel like I'm giving y'all like all the what not to do's in this one. But so I am emotionally aware of myself. And I had gotten to a point where I was like mid-level management in my career. And a group of my peers and I differed on whose job was more important, right? And really it was whose people were the better people at their jobs because it mattered for awards and accolades and promotions and things. So of course I'm showing up to the fight like full on, like let's go. There's no way that you guys are going to tell me that your people are outperforming my people. Like let's run the numbers. Like let's go fact by fact, right? Because I'm bringing my data because I'm a data person. I'm bringing my data. So we're in this situation and it gets a little heated, as it should, right? That's normal professional conflict because we're advocating for our people. And at that level of management, we hadn't learned how to advocate for the needs of the organization at large. We only knew how to advocate for our particular person. It was like, I'm the blue team and only the blue team needs to be in all the top spots. And you're the orange team and the orange team, you're like, no, orange goes on top. And so that's the environment, just so you can get a sense of the intensity of the room and the matter, right? So we're doing this back and forth. It's all respectful to a degree, and we're all peers except for our boss. And he's kind of like watching this thing happening. He's asking some questions, but he really wants us to have these conversations in front of him. And one of my peers said something that was totally like out of left field about one of my members. And the face I made, I didn't say anything more, but the faces that I made as he was talking was like they needed a microphone because they were saying their own things. and and so we leave that situation and it's time for my feedback. Like again, I keep telling people like y'all asking for feedback. I don't think I've had to ask for feedback. They just feedback finds me. And so we're having a feedback session and he says, one thing I will say about where I want you to develop is I know exactly what you feel and what you think about something without you saying anything because it's all over your face. And so I said, do you have an example that I can grow from? Right? That's kind of like a tongue in cheek question because I could give him 1,000 examples that I could grow from. But he says, well, yeah, when we were in the conference room and we were talking about this and this, and I saw it all on your face, and so did your peers. I said, I'm going to take that feedback. Let me process it. But I will say this also. I wanted him to know what I was thinking. I wanted him to know how absolutely ridiculous the comment was that he made, and I wanted him to feel every glare that I was sending his way because I didn't want to need to say with words what I could say with my eyes and what he should never have said out his mouth. And yes, I talked to him after and we had an exchange of words about that comment, but I wanted him to know. And I said, you know what, sir, sometimes I want people to know what I'm thinking. And that was one of those times. And he said, well, that might be the case. But what can happen is you will shut people down from telling you things because they know you're going to have a reaction. And I said, oh. So I have actively worked on since that time. And I think it's been about 10 years since I got that feedback. And I'm still actively working through when to show what I feel and when to not. One time using emotions to tell my point that was super effective was in my organization. I had a lot of younger people and they were making all kind of silly mistakes, right? There was a head injury because somebody was loading something, lifting something wrong, hit themselves on the head, a little gash in their head like that. I had two people that were on these 4x4s, like they're supposed to be driving around to deliver things and they like spun it around. Somebody spun out, hit themselves in the tree. I had somebody who had accidentally cut their finger, not off, but like a deep cut in their finger because I deal with people, we're cooks too. And these things happen in succession. And so I made an emotional move. So what I did, I gathered them in small groups. All of them had a meeting and we had it in succession every 20 minutes because I went in and went out. I told my leadership team what I was doing, my immediate, just the two who were going to be around. And I asked them to walk with me through this because I need to make an emotional move. So I explained to them, I'm going to do something emotional. I didn't tell them what it was. I just need you to be with me while I do it. So what I did, I went into those small groups of these people who were making these careless errors because they were horse playing and because they were not following the instructions of how we're supposed to do things. They just were going like, like what's it called? Like Wild Wild West. And it was causing injury. And I'm like, injury leads to death. And no, not on my watch. And so I had everybody come in. And usually I come into these small groups and it's good, right? It's like somebody's getting awards or somebody's getting promoted, or I just want to do a quick, like, let me tell y'all what's going on. I'm here for any questions, right? We want to highlight this person with parading them around for their good accomplishments. Just want to take 10 minutes of your time to honor this person. Usually that's the mood. But this time, and they didn't know. So the groups are gathered and I go to the first group and all of them went the same way. But I used emotions and I'm just trying to walk us through when to use emotional. I was intelligent enough to know that what my emotional impact was going to be on this group, and I chose to use it. Not weaponize it, but I did it on purpose. So I walked into the room and I say few words. I say, everybody, please sit down. And I tell my person, I said, pass everybody, pass it around. I said, everybody put your phones away. and get out something, a hard surface to write on, right? And I gave them, I said, could you give everybody an ink pen? And then another person, could you give everybody a blank piece of paper? All right. And there's no like excitement in my voice. And I'm just like, nope, this is not the time for that. And I say, part of my job, because this is true, part of my job is to write letters to parents, children, or family members explaining the death of their person in our organization, should one happen. I have assisted plenty of people more than I want to with writing those letters, and they're not hard. They're not easy to write. They're heartbreaking, and they make you cry, or they make you become real hard in your heart. So I want y'all to, right now, who is it? Write the name at the top of your paper of who it is that I would be notifying in the event of your death due to an accident. And then I want another part of what I have to do in these letters is I have to explain the details of why this person is no longer here. And this won't be, and it won't, in your cases, I'm not writing it. I wouldn't be writing a letter to a situation like these because of a war or some grand worthy cause. I'd be writing it because you guys aren't following the rules, because you're horse playing, because you think safety is a joke, right? Because you want to spin around and do donuts out here, and all of you guys want to watch and record, and nobody jumped in there. So I want you to take your pen, and I want you to start this letter, and I want, when you finish it, pass it to me. Because at this rate, you guys need to have one on file so I can have something to start with when all of your stupidity catches up with you. They couldn't write the letter, right? And I didn't really want them to, because like I don't want them, self-fulfilling prophecies of nothing bad. But after a short while, I said, put the pens down. And I explained to them, this is what you're putting me through. To have to figure out why I need to tell your mom, your dad, your children, your brothers, uncles, nieces, nephews, aunts, grandmas, grandpas. What am I going to tell them happened on our watch while you're no longer here? Because you didn't follow the rules. It's not fun for me. It's not, nobody wants to write these letters for any reason, but especially for something that is within our control. And then I gave them a lecture about safety and how we're going to change our culture, and I'm not having it. And it was like a whole mom thing. And and then I walked out. I said, could you please collect the pens? We have somewhere to be. Walked out. Went to the next one. I did it all morning. And I didn't have space in between because I didn't want to come down off of that emotional where I was at. I had some of them, one of them didn't like me no more as a leader. She confessed it after it was time for her to go. She was like, I stopped liking you that day. I said, I could tell. You didn't speak to me the same. You didn't give me the same version of yourself. I said, and that was okay. Right? And she said, because I was angry. I was angry that you would put us through that. Like it's a game. I said, right. You were angry that I would play games with your life, like you all were playing games with your lives. So I know there's a risk there, right? I had people that were crying in that room because of the weight of it. I mean, I delivered this emotional because I felt that. I was crying telling them because it was real to me that I could lose one of you to something stupid that you ain't got to be doing, and you think it's a joke. So using emotions to convey important points, I think is still powerful. And I would do it again if I needed to, because I needed them to feel that. I didn't just need them to comply. I needed them to feel what I was saying because they didn't know the experience that I have had with that real thing happening where lives are at stake when you make mistakes. And you don't have to make these mistakes. These are not even mistakes or bad decisions. You definitely don't have to make bad decisions. Right? So an emotional intelligent organization has leadership that looks like people who react well under pressure. And these are questions I want you to ask yourself. How well do I react or respond? Always choose respond under pressure. What am I modeling emotionally for my team? I know in my organization we would take a knee. That was a normal thing. I'm like, hey, if I'm feeling it, I know y'all are, right? Let's just take a knee. Take a knee looks different in a high performing organization, right? It's not that we close the doors and everybody go home. You figure out what that looks like, how to rejuvenate. I heard my son say something like my how to fill my social intelligence or social cup up or something like that. So you have to know how your organization is filled up again. It's not always we need to close and shut down and do nothing so everybody can go home and do something, whatever they want to do, but just not be here. That might be it, but it might not be. So I also want you to ask yourself, do you hide emotions that your team needs to see? When I'm receiving information from my team, and it's usually if they're fixing a problem for me or for whoever we're serving, if I'm not good with that answer, they know it. And there's a way you do it where nobody feels degraded or belittled, but they know, oh, that didn't hit the mark. And as a leader, you owe them that transparency. And sometimes I simply say, okay, guys, hold on, pause. This isn't hitting the mark. Do y'all have something closer to this type of answer? Because this right here is pretty far off. And if they start trying to make it up right then, I'm saying, no, no, no. I'm asking for what you prepared. This isn't it. So like, let's pause right here. Use this time to regroup. Let me be more clear about what I'm looking for because I know y'all can get there. So here's what it is. Right. So I want them to know and everybody that's a little embarrassing. You put your head down a little bit, but you don't walk away totally deflated. You know, when if your boss tells you like, hey, this isn't quite it, right? Don't hide that from your team. It's not fair because then it goes somewhere. It goes internal. And you start making up stories about your team because they didn't perform or they didn't give you what you wanted, but they don't know that. And you could have simply told them at that time, hey, I was looking for something a little bit different. Actually, this isn't it. Or sometimes I say to people, don't present from that angle. That's gonna miss the mark. Try it again from this angle. Right? Um, okay, let's get you to your happy place with this topic. So pause. I believe if you can pause, you can lead. So just pause. Pause from all the busyness of leading and just pause for a moment. Study yourself, not from the lens of being overly self critical, because that is a slippery slope of danger, craziness that we don't want to go to. But you want to analyze yourself in a sense of you're studying yourself. Make yourself the subject of your leadership study. Just like I talked about with some of the Brene Brown training that I was able to go through, exploring who you are, why you are, when you are that way. It is so it's a valuable investment. So I want you to do that. And I want you to practice labeling your emotions and your language clearly. If you want to say you're mad, then say that, right? Don't speak roundabout about your emotions. If you don't have a word for it, then okay, maybe that's okay. And sometimes I've said this, I don't have a word for it, but something about where we are right now is making me uncomfortable. And I'll go through. I'm like, well, maybe it's not uncomfortable. I feel that maybe I'm actually feel left out. I feel left out of the decision making process, and so I'm trying to get back to why I'm thinking this. Was that your intention, or did I give you some impression where that should be the case? I think playing out the emotions, out loud to get the actual emotion is important. So you can label it and put it where it needs to go. And then I want you to let your team experience your emotions with you, as long as it is conducive to the goals of your organization, right? It's okay to wear your heart on your sleeve. Mine is right here all the time. And that's okay. I'm okay with it now, right? Maybe I had to get older, but I'm okay with it now. My emotions are part of me. They don't, I control them, right? They're not driving me and I'm out here being crazy. But sometimes I do need to fix my face, right? And sometimes I have those moments where I got a partner in leadership and they say, hey, fix your face. And I'm like, oh, because We don't need to see that at this moment. Like, I enjoyed having the mask on when we had that mandate. Just gonna say that right there. So, leaders, let's agree that having high emotional intelligence builds the organizations that we want to be a part of and that we want to lead. Um, it's up to leaders to know themselves so that they can emotionally lead themselves and govern their emotions. You are responsible for the emotional culture you set in your organization, and it starts within. I hope this episode was helpful for you. Please like, share, subscribe, comment, post. Let me know. And until next week, happy leading.